Hey y'all, happy Monday evening. Welcome to another What Else is Going On, aka We Go podcast episode. Hold on. There we go. I'm your girl, your host, Taria. We are getting ready to get into part one of the Real Housewives of Orange County reunion. It's gonna be a flyby. I say that and then it might be like 45 minutes. No, it's really not gonna be 45 minutes. The season is over. How do y'all think, what would you what are y'all thoughts on this season? Do you think they could have kept it? The whole season could have been an email. Do you hope they do major revamping for season 20? I just feel like honestly, I just watched it because it was a Housewives show that was on. And I was like, okay, and because I've watched it, I didn't start out watching OC, but then of course as it came out, I went back and watched a lot of it. I'm not sure what season I started. I know I was already watching it during Gretchen's season. Maybe Heather's, I think Heather's season was the first season I actually started. I went back to the beginning of her season and watched it because there was a scene when she was showing Terry ties in either his office or something. And me and Corey were home and he was flipping through the channels and we watched that scene and we just watched it and went back and watched it that season. So whatever season that was. But what do y'all think? But let's get into this reunion. So, at the beginning of the reunion, we see the women getting ready as always, and all the ladies are on the stage. Andy checks in with all the ladies. They check in with Shannon. She's fresh off a week from the Golden Door. Remember, they was at the Golden Door when they confronted Katie, and she couldn't. And she said she hadn't been in contact with a blogger, and she couldn't pull the DMs up because there was no Wi-Fi. Shannon says she's feeling good, and I'm feeling good. Andy asked Heather about, hey, you said you wanted to be a Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. How was the ride here? So I'm assuming the reunion was shot in Beverly Hills. That's what I'm thinking. And she said it was 7 minutes. I said, well, okay. Andy turned to Emily and says, you look great. What's different? She said, look, I got my stuff together after filming. This was a rough season. I was dealing with a lot with the kids and with Shane. So then he brings up her weight and told her it looks like she's lost weight. And she said, yeah, about 25 to 30 pounds. And I'm gonna say this, y'all know I do not care for Emily at all, even a little bit. But I'm trying to make sure that I'm being unbiased. And if I am being biased, then say it. But I will say, I wonder if she gets tired of her weight being a subject every season, or if she's okay with it because she's showing that for her, her stress manifests in that way for her. Some people, their stress manifests differently. You may have ulcers, you may wear it on your face, you may lose hair, you may feel tired all the time. And with her, maybe food is comfort to her. So maybe she's okay with bringing it up because I did wonder, like, is she tired of it coming up every season? But then also, I know for me, when I see people and they be like, "Girl, you look good, you lost weight." When you're trying to do that, it feels good, right? But then at the same time, like I said, she's on a huge platform where she's scrutinized. So I don't know. I just wonder if she gets tired of her weight being a topic. She does look like she lost weight though. But it just made me wonder, does she ever get tired of that? So anyway, they bring up, he turns to Gina. They talk about her being in real estate. She loves the grind. She loves the schlepping. And I can see what she means by that. She probably loves what she does and she's working and she's making money. So I get that. They talked to Katie. Andy said, we missed you the back half of the season. I said, who's we? But we missed you the back half of the season and you're here with the group again. I wonder how you're feeling about that. And do you have any intentions for today? She said she wants to make up for lost time and that there's some things that didn't get said that need to be said. And she's happy to be there. They check in with Jen. He checks in with Tamara. They bring up her breast surgery. She said her pectoral muscle had detached, child, ooh, and was up by her shoulder. So she asked the surgeon to do something with the boobs while he was there. Then she says, by the way, I won't be quitting today. Andy said, are you sure? And then she said, the day is young. I said, see, that didn't work. If Andy had said, will you be quitting today? And she said, the day is young, then that would have worked. But you brought up that you weren't quitting and then went, okay. Whew. Anyway, but she does say she's in much better spirits because of Teddy. And we do know that Teddy has reported that 0 tumors have been detected. So, congratulations again to Teddy. Prayers that it remains that way. I know that has to feel good, you know. He brings up Tamara posting about Alexis's wedding, how beautiful it was. Tamara's like, I feel weird talking about it in front of Shannon. Shannon said, that's okay. I saw it on social media. It's fine. And Tamara said it was one of the most beautiful weddings she's ever been to. And Andy says, Jen, I heard you were invited, then uninvited. Emily goes to talk. And Jen said, oh, let me answer. I said, come on, what, third season housewife using a voice? Okay. She said she was invited, then she was uninvited. The day of the wedding, she sent a message to Alexis saying, thinking of you and John. I hope your wedding is beautiful, blah, blase, blase. And Alexis is like, oh my gosh, basically wanting to mend their friendship. Hey, are you and Ryan free today? Girl. So Andy wants to know what was the separation from Jen and Alexis. Jen says Alexis felt like in the Shannon and Alexis of it all, Jen was taking Shannon's side. So there was that. They talk about if John was wearing the Ferragamo shoes that Shannon bought him. Remember, we talked about that last season. Shannon said nope because she zoomed in. And remember, they was on sale because Heather had looked up the price. Wasn't they like seven something? And Shannon said she got them for half off. So Andy asked Tamara, look, you joked about quitting today. Do you have any intentions? She said she's going in. She said she's still in an emotional spot. He brings up therapy. She said she's still going. She's trying not to get reactive when she gets upset. Baby Andy said, I thought your reactions would be different. They were not. She said, oh, you didn't think so? He said, mm-mm. I said, Gina said, with things like therapy, they get worse before they get better. You open up all these wounds, but you are not healed yet. So then Jen said, when you want to make a change, you're an adult, make the change. I get what she was saying. It's not always that easy. But I also feel like on the opposite side of that, when people say, I'm working on it, I'm going to therapy, I know my triggers. If you continue over and over and over and over again to be triggered and don't do any work, like going to therapy, it's almost like quitting smoking, right? Every store you go in is no longer not going to have cigarettes. You have to, sometimes it's hard, but you got to fight through it. And you see the cigarettes behind the counter and you're tempted, right? But you may have to fight through that. It's not going to therapy and then walking out and those same triggers aren't going to come at you. You need to use the tools that you learn in therapy to try to get through those triggers. So Tamara is always, I'm in therapy, I'm in therapy, I'm in therapy, like this season. Oh, but I'm going through this with Teddy because I'm going to say it. I'm probably going to say it again in this episode. Tamara's using Teddy being sick. I'm sorry. I believe she's concerned and that's her friend for real, but she is using, I sound like Whitney, child, for real, and Whitney from Salt Lake City. But I feel like she's using that as an excuse. But so you still have to use the tools. But she'll say, oh, I was upset. So I said this, which we'll get into later. Anyway, so so Tamara said, I was on a good track. Then 2 weeks into filming with everything going on with Teddy. And again, she's using Teddy. Shannon said, it's hard. And I know probably inappropriate, but you want us to give you grace that I didn't get last year. You couldn't give me grace when I was going through one of the worst periods of my life. Tamara said, I didn't ask for grace. And then Jen said, which is true, but however, Jen said, well, she didn't outright ask for it. But when she would be like, you guys don't understand, I'm going through the worst time of my life. Jen said, I feel like it's basically they're going to look bad if we want to move forward with you with a tough conversation or issue we have with you. But now it's the hardest time of your life. So now we can't even move forward. So Tamara and Shannon going back and forth. Shannon's like, look, I'm just bringing up my frustrations. Shannon says Tamara is the grudge holder, Tamara grudge. So all the ladies are like, oh, child, that was a good one. Tamara says she doesn't hold grudges. On her podcast, it's brought up that on her podcast that she has with Teddy, Tamara brought up she'd like to see Vicky return. The way Vicky is truly icky Vicky to me. Y'all know she recently said that Heather was too liberal for the OC. What does that mean? I want to know what people mean when they say that. Too liberal. What does that mean? Are you talking about people would say that Democrats have bleeding hearts and It's all about the people, people, people for them. Like, what are you trying to say when you say she's too liberal? Does that fall under Black Lives Matter? Does that fall under gay rights? Like, what are you trying to say? Because you're trying to say, well, you are. Those of us who are in the minority groups know what you're trying to say, but I want you to say it. What does it mean that Heather's too liberal? Okay. Anyway, Tamara says it's going to be the 20th season. They need to respect the OG. So Andy said, last I heard, y'all wasn't even speaking. Tamara said, well, because she picked Shannon's side in the argument between Shannon and Tamara. Andy, wait, so was it Andy and Emily were like, no, or something like that. Child, my nose is messed up. But then they show a scene with Katie and Tamara that was unaired, and Tamara says Vicky was dead to her. She would rather be around Gretchen. Did y'all see on social media Vicky driving up to Tamara's house and they reunited and Tamara's doing an ad for coffee? Andy asked Tamara, did they now? But this is before that though, or maybe it was after. I don't know. Andy asked Tamara, did they? No, it had to be after. Andy asked Tamara, did they make up? She says yes. Emily said, I feel like it's a strategy, more of a friendship. Yes, and I said I have to agree with Emily. And Tamara's like, well, what do you mean by that? And Emily's like, I feel like you want to have a friend on the season because of how she's on the outs with a lot of her cast. They're calling her out. I do agree with Emily on that. Andy says, Shannon, what's your reaction? Shannon said, well, try. I talked to Vicky and she didn't necessarily tell me the story that it wasn't depicted to me the way Tamara's depicted, that they're all good. Tamara said, we haven't completely moved forward. I said, but you just said that y'all made up. So you didn't say all that we've made up, but we haven't completely moved forward. Now you're saying it because Shannon says she has talked to Vicky. Shannon said it's manipulative, and I agree. They bring up Alexis being on a podcast saying that Shannon was trying to ice out Tamara. Tamara says 100%. Shannon says, no, I don't strategize. I don't do all that. I don't even know what I'm going to wear half the time. Mind you, Heather said, oh, stop. Like Heather and somebody else said like that wasn't true. So then Katie says, you didn't have a phone call with Alex Baskin. Alex Baskin, we do know Alex is a producer, is a current producer who's friends with Kyle Richards. Also, I don't know if he still does, but had a Bravo podcast, which to me, okay. Anyway, Katie says you didn't have a phone call with Alex Baskin, again, the producer, in the middle of the season and say, I'm uncomfortable with being around Katie. I want Gretchen to have her orange. Shannon says, I did not. Katie says to Jen, didn't she call Alex? Child, Jen said, how am I supposed to know who she called? Andy says, so so basically Katie's saying, Shannon, you called the producer Alex and said you're uncomfortable around Katie. I want Gretchen to have her spot. Didn't she, Jen? Jen is like, I don't know. I didn't tell you that. Katie's like, yeah, I heard it from you. In his ear, Andy holds his earpiece and says, Alex is in my ear telling me he never had a conversation with Shannon. Shannon says, thank you. Katie says, oh, okay then. Here's my thing with this. I do believe that Katie has a little bit of a lying problem. Absolutely. And I do believe the ladies had a right to ask her questions about what the bloggers and things and hold her accountable. The way they did it, I didn't like it. With the self-righteousness of it all, as if they have not done the same thing. Didn't like it. Because they all do it. So it's almost like we can't even have the argument like, well, you shouldn't do it. They all do it, right? Frankly, I'm tired of seeing it. However, I didn't like the way they went about it with Katie, as if they were so above her. With that being said, Jen is shaky for me. Jen conveniently gets amnesia, like Gina said earlier in the season. So I don't know that Jen forgot. If this didn't happen and Katie made that up, she don't need to be on nobody's TV. She needs to be on somebody's couch talking to somebody. And I mean that, not even being funny, shady. If she made that up, that whole story, so I feel like there's a combination of truth in there somewhere. Because where would you get that detailed story? Like I said, if she made it up, then she has bigger issues than. And if Jen is straight up lying, Like, Jen, you girl, mm-mm. Anyway, Andy brings up to Katie how she got closer to Tamara at the end of the season. How would you describe the evolution of your friendship? Katie said it was nice to feel heard and she saw my side. So, oh, Emily believes that like the meeting with Tamara and Katie didn't make sense. She said, because you made it clear that Katie was dead to you. And sure enough, in unaired footage after the lie detector test, Tamara is saying she's dead to me. And she was like, you also threatened to sue her. She didn't threaten to sue her. She said, or Heather said that. And they show Tamara saying, I should sue you. So technically, these ladies have issues recalling exactly how a thing is said. But anyway, so Katie said they talked about all of that and moved forward. So a viewer wrote in and said, Heather, whether it was a game or not, you made it clear you would not trust Tamara with sensitive information. How can you be friends with Tamara but never fully share yourself with her? I liked Heather's answer. I'm 1000% with Heather, and I'm glad she stuck to her guns and didn't backpedal because we know Emily and Gina will backpedal. They have a lot to say around other people and sometimes in their confessionals, but then they soften their delivery to Tamara. So Heather said, we've been friends for a very long time. Some may say historical friends. Didn't, isn't that what Jen said, Heather said about Tamara last year? And that's why she said it. Anyway, she said, some may say historical friends. She said, but I care about you. But if you ask why I picked your name out of a group, it's because I can't trust you with the inconsistencies and unpredictable nature of who you are sometimes. And that's just the truth. I said, come on, Heather. Inconsistencies and your unpredictable nature doesn't make you a trustworthy person. Cha. So Tamara says, I hear that. And that's something, and I'm going to work on it. And that's something we may need to have a deeper conversation about. Emily said, well, I said it too, because I've seen you throughout time say horrible things about Shannon, who was your best friend in 10 years. So Tamara says, she said stuff about me too. Shannon said, all I said was that you had an ego, and that's your justification for treating me like ish all last year. Tamara was like, that's not all you said. Andy brings up how Tamara likes to throw people's secrets in their faces to hurt them. I said, not Andy getting in on the action. She says to Andy, like what? People that know they do it, but think you won't be able to recall, like to do that. If you notice, they'll say, like what? Give me an example. And that is a good way to get somebody off track. My dad told me when I was younger, when you are arguing with someone or you have a point to prove, you don't say, you always do this, you always do that, you always do this. He said, you give them dates, times, or like, basically like, oh, when you did this, when you did this, when you did this, versus you always do this, you always do that. Now and I always remember that. But so so Tamara says, like what? So Andy brings up, no, so Shannon said, like my dad. I said, I know that's right. Tamara goes back to season 15. I said, she did not remember that. Which one of y'all bloggers slash journalists told her that? Dave Quinn, did you remind her of that season? Anyway, but to me, that wasn't a receipt because Tamara says, Shannon, you said you had alcoholism in your immediate family and you had to go to Al-Anon. They show the clip. That is not what Shannon said. Shannon said, I grew up with alcoholism in my family, so I used to go to Al-Anon when she was talking to Brahma. She didn't say immediate. She could have been talking about, we could assume she meant immediate, but honestly, she said with alcoholism in my family. Now, I will say this. I talked to some of my white friends, and they don't get into the ones that I've talked to. They don't do like, oh, that's my first cousin, my second cousin. They're like, after the third cousin, it doesn't matter. No, I'm saying, oh, that's my first cousin, second cousin, third cousin, fourth, like family, right? So maybe we look at it differently. So when somebody says my family, I don't immediately think their immediate family. When I'm talking about my family, if I'm talking about my immediate family, I'll name my immediate family or say immediate family. So when Shannon said that, I didn't immediately, when I saw that flashback, I didn't immediately think in her immediately family. I thought it could have been an aunt, it could have been an uncle. You know what I'm saying? It could have been her mom, dad, aunt, uncle, cousin, right? But So for Tamra to say, you said your immediate family, and that's even if Shannon did say that in season 15, my immediate family, Shannon didn't mention her dad on camera. So why would you? Like Tamra tries to play these games, right? So Tamra has a nerve to say, so it's okay for you to say it? Yes, because it's my family. Somebody should have asked her, so it's okay for you to talk about Sydney not talking to you, but not Gretchen? I'm just saying, since we talking about families, right? Child, I said. So Shannon got emotional and said she had to sit down with her dad and had to tell him it was get ready to be brought up. So we see the unseen footage of her telling her dad that it was going to air. He actually apologizes for some of the things she went through as a child. Shannon said, my dad held my hand the other day and said that he lives for me. He lives to see me. My 94-year-old dad. They're very close. Gene the machine. So then Shannon also said she was upset because watching that clip when they were in Temecula, Tamara says under her breath, I don't even think she cares about her dad. How dare you? And I said, yeah, that was like, girl, what if somebody said to you, your daughter has asked you repeatedly not to talk about her. You continue to. So if somebody had told Tamara, or if Tamara saw one of them say, I don't think she cares about her daughter on camera, right? So um, she's Shannon said, my head would have been ripped off if I say stuff about your family, which I could do. I said, okay. So Tamara said, I said it because I was pissed of how you were acting. It's every single time because she gets mad, she throws something out. So another viewer wrote in and asked Jen, did she feel Tamara would have less problems with the group if she took accountability for her actions? Jen said the night they all sat outside after the cake decorating party, I looked at you and said, you're in therapy. When do you look in the mirror and say it might be me? Tamara says, this is me looking in the mirror saying it might be me. No, ma'am. No, ma'am. Jen said, that means then your patterns have to change, behaviors have to change. And Tamara's like, that's why I'm going to therapy. I said, girl. Andy said, has your therapy enlightened you to anything that you've came today feeling like you want to apologize for? She said her plan is to stay calm, apologize, take about accountability, and try to move forward. Heather said, sounds like a good plan. I like that plan. Child, they bring up, I got that many notes. Oh no, we about to, it shouldn't even be this long, child. All right. They bring up Katie's package. They show flashbacks of all the stuff going on with her and the bloggers in the season. Andy said, were you surprised by the viewers' response to you after the lie detector episode? I felt like the viewers rallied around you. She said, yes. Um, she was really shocked, surprised, and it made her feel good. Again, I still think she'd be lying. I'm not discounting that. I do feel like it, but I also feel like the way they came at her was kind of. So they bring up Shannon unfollowing her and now refollowing her. Shannon said, I never stopped following her. So Andy was like, where are you two? Are you two in a better place? Shannon said no. And Katie said, we haven't talked. They just are where they are. So Emily says, look, we all know you recorded Shannon at the promo shoot, but you're trying to make it seem like you just sent a voice note to Matt. But you obviously played it for Alexis. Katie swears she did not. Andy said, well, Alexis went on social media, says she heard it. Katie said, then I want her to tell me what Shannon said. They should have said, hold on, because we know later Alexis texted Andy by accident. Answer your phone. What did Shannon say in the voice note? So then Andy says, let's play it. And it did seem real. Katie was like, no. Andy said, I'm just kidding. Shannon was like, no, I want to finish this because you said I was hours late and caused all this disruption. Katie said you was so late they had to change the hairstyle they was going to do because they didn't have time. So then Tamra, remember earlier Andy talked about her bringing up stuff, private stuff to hurt people. Tamra brings up, you would know about secret recording, right, Shannon? Shannon said, here we go. She said, there you go, bringing up something to hurt. Somebody else is going to get hurt in you trying to take a dig at me. So Shannon admits she was at Vicky's house or on vacation. She said Vicky and her husband, is they secretly married? But Vicky and her husband may have gotten into an argument, and I guess it was heated, and she wanted to make sure everything was going to be fine. She said, and it was, and I deleted the video. Cha. For Tamara to bring that up proved Andy and the other lady's points. So a viewer wrote in and said, Emily, you seem like a fierce defender of your family. Did you go into defense mode when Katie was coming after your family at the beginning of the year? Emily says yes, because this is a level of invasion of privacy and all kinds of things that are so outside of anything I've had to deal with before. I think she meant on the show. She said, when I got the when I get information or see stuff on social media, I screenshot it and send it to Gina and have a good laugh. That's what you're supposed to do. So Katie said, well, last year at the union, you brought up stuff about the custody of my kids, and it seemed very malicious. Emily said, I will differentiate. Are we in the courtroom? She apologizes for bringing it up in the manner she did. She said, because it did look like she was bringing up something about her kids. And again, they have brought up why she lost physical custody. So Katie reiterates, look, I was in my 20s, had no money, had no this. It was the best thing to do at the time, but who are you that I have to explain that to? Katie said, you thought it would be fun to bring that up. Heather and a couple other people say, no, she didn't think it was going to be fun. Katie said, well, why did she bring it up? So Jen speaks up and says, because she felt like there were inconsistencies in your story. Emily said, I feel like you use content creators, podcasts, journalists, whoever you want to fight your battles for you. Now, if you're pissed, you're allowed to be pissed. That's fine. But have the guts to bring up what you were pissed about to my face and not use these outside bloggers. Katie said, I truly apologize for how I handled it. Another viewer wrote in and said, Jen, why did you say Katie was a con artist? Why did you say Jen was a con artist between seasons to Gina? Jen swears she didn't remember. Now I'm going to say this. The way that Gina, we've seen on more than one occasion that Gina ran something back totally different than how it was said. And even at the reunion, Gina ran it back differently than how she did in the beginning of the season. She tells Katie, like, even Jen thinks you're a con artist. Jen was questioning things like, I see some inconsistencies, some differences in Katie's story. And man, I'm like wondering, is she a con artist? And Ryan was like, no, she's not. That's what happened. She didn't call that girl a con artist. I said, the way, Gina, you be talking about Jen having amnesia, the way you repeat things. Andy said, we got a lot of questions about the lie detector test. Katie, you told Us Weekly that you felt like it was one person who didn't want to film with you and they convinced the others. She said, yeah, I felt like the person that set me up. Andy said, who is it? She said, Emily. Katie said, I was set up. Emily said, look, I said, and y'all know I don't give Emily nothing because I think Katie be lying too. Emily said, I don't need a lie detector test to know you're lying. Just that y'all may not think so. I do. My opinion. Okay. Emily said, I didn't have the power to set that up. And Emily says, Katie, you said it on camera when they were away on that trip to, was it New Orleans? And she said, I'll take a lie detector test when she was talking to Gretchen and somebody else. I can't remember, maybe Jen. So in other words, production set it up because Andy lets us know production is the one that found the lie detector administrators that would do this on TV because not all of them will. Emily has also made it very clear it's not her idea. So Gina said, I wasn't expecting you to fail every single one, though. Everyone knows if you're going to set it up, you have to make it look like it's legit. So basically, they would have given you some to pass, some easy ones. That way it didn't look like it was a setup. So they bring up Heather failing. And then somebody wrote into Emily and said, do you think Heather arranged that paparazzi when Emily, Heather, and Gretchen, remember they had their girls sleep over while the other girls were in Temecula and they were walking across the street and paparazzi comes up and says Heather didn't set up that other paparazzi shot that we had to hear about all last season. Emily said, look, I know it looks set up, but you had to be there. We were walking around, couldn't figure out where we were going to park, where we were going to go. We circled around and basically paparazzi was there. So no, it was not set up. And a part of me doesn't know if Emily is saying that because her and Heather are so tight now or what. Anyway, who knows? So, hold on, y'all. Oh, somebody wrote into Katie, why don't you say the things that you say in your confessional to the lady's face? Katie said, I should. Tamara said, a lot of people should. Emily said, what does that mean? Tamara said, why do you think I'm talking about you? Emily said, I don't think you are because I say things. So who you talking about? Like, what's up? Tamara said, You say a lot of things in your confessionals about me or behind my back. Emily said, what? Like I don't trust you? Tamara said, no, you said that to my face. Emily's like, exactly. So now I will say this. Emily does make snarky comments in her confessional. A lot of people do. She does say a lot to the face. Here's where I kind of go back and forth. She does say a lot to their faces. And some of this stuff, a lot of the stuff that she says about Tamara to her face, she does say in her confessionals. However, like I said earlier, she changes her delivery and softens the delivery. And I get doing that sometimes, but sometimes you need to confront the energy with that same energy that you had. Like, girl, what are you doing? You know what I'm saying? So, but Tamara couldn't really name. Remember how she asked Andy earlier? Name them. Like, what do I say? What things do I bring up that was private to her to use against somebody? Now Tamara, so now Emily is saying, what do I say in confessionals that I don't say to your face? I said, oh, look at Emily and Tamara. So there's a lot. Wait, oh yeah, I said my notes say I'm kind of split with that one. Shannon chimes in. Tamara said, nobody's talking to you, just be quiet. Shannon said, I want a show where we express our opinions. And I'm saying stuff. I can do that. So Tamara is like, my feelings got hurt a lot. Gina addresses the comment. We move on. Gina addresses the comment about what Kiki Monique said about it being an Asian designer. Now, I'm going to be honest in this part, y'all. I'm just going to keep it real, my thoughts, right? Gina said, watching it back, and then she goes into therapy speak. I said, this is her way of trying to get out of what she knows sounds bad. Because again, even if she didn't mean it in that way, Katie said, I want to showcase Asian designers. For you to think you gonna clock her and say, is that an Asian designer? Girl, who are you talking to? Mind your business. How dare you, right? So Gina uses therapy speak. She said, with that being said, me watching it back, and she goes into, I'm sorry that triggered something from your past. I'm not in the business of re-triggering traumas. I'm sorry. Y'all know I'm not always with Katie. I was with her on this. Katie said, I appreciate that, but you didn't trigger no trauma. I just didn't appreciate it at the time. You're trying to make it seem as if she was traumatized. Nah, what you said, I ain't like that. Because again, stay out of Asian business. I said I want to showcase Asian designers. The one person who should never be talking about fashion on this show. And you gonna ask me if it was an Asian designer? Wrong road, baby. So Katie said, and I never called you the R word. Say it, racist. Why we can't say it? I never called you a racist. I'm so sick of people so scared to say that word. And I'm not talking about saying it as in calling somebody that, but anyway. She said, I never called you that. I did say it had undertones of that. Gina said, I accept that. I really wish you had said it to me instead of you sitting down with Kiki Monique. I get what Gina's saying. Girl, I wish you had said that to me so I could explain. Katie does say, I get your point. But I also told Kiki that I thought we were trying to move forward and I didn't think you were a bad person. But this is what made me feel that way. Here is where I say, I'm just going to be honest. Katie said they were bonding being POCs. Now, this is twofold for me. I could see if Kiki Monique was on the show and they were the two women of color. And there was the woman of color, Katie, and the black woman, Kiki, on the show. And they were bonding over it. Because for you to say her and I were bonding over being people of color in the world, in white spaces, maybe, that's what I'm thinking. That thought just dawned on me because I was like, y'all not on the same show. So when you say you're bonding over being people of color, in what way? But I guess it could be being in all white spaces. Here's where I look at Kiki Monique a little bit, like, not in a bad way. I just wonder what was the intent because of telling Gina that. Because me as a black woman, if I'm bonding with another black woman or another person of color about us being in white spaces, And if what Katie says is true, we don't know, unfortunately, because Katie's track record. If she did tell Gina this about the age, I mean, told Kiki Monique about the Asian designer, but then said, but you know what? I think she's a good person. I don't think she meant it that way. It did just have racial undertones. That's her getting it out. There's things that I'm never going to say in front of non-black people, period. If I'm talking to somebody black, I might be talking about a situation I'm not hurt by it, but like, girl, why this happened? I know she a good person, but girl, I just need to get it out. It's not then for that other minority to take it back to the white person. Y'all was just bonding over being POCs. And now, Kiki, you run that back to the white lady? Like, why would you do that? Like, why? For me, it was, I'm sorry, I'm gonna say it was to ensure that she got camera time because she met with Gretchen. Gretchen was a friend of. But if a main cast member comes, that might have more of a chance. And I just thought that was kind of like whack a little bit. I'm just being honest. Whether it was Kiki or another black content creator, whoever it was, I just feel like, and just because we're all black women, POCs, I'm not saying we all have to stick together, but in that moment, I felt like if what Katie said was true and she was just bonding with Kiki over being a POC in white spaces, and she brought up that comment that would raise quite a few eyebrows that Gina said, that was just that. I'm just telling you what she said. I don't think she meant it like that. She's not a bad person, but girl, they're wild, right? Because I'm not gonna lie. Sometimes I'll talk to my girlfriends and be like, "Girl, they wild." Guess what she said? I'm not, and it don't go no further than that, right? So I don't, I didn't like that, but also I wish Katie had the conversation with Gina. There's that. Um, then uh Andy asked, "Is there anything that the ladies want to apologize to Katie for?" Shannon didn't like that she told Katie that she was just as evil as Alexis. And then Tamara says, and Tamara, child, they completely ignored that. Shannon says she wishes that she had not have said that. Andy asked Katie, "Is there a place to move forward with some of the people in the group?" She says, "I hope so." And he says, "I do too." So there's that. Gretchen gets ready to come in, child, and she's getting all dialed up backstage. She says she's excited to be clearing up some stuff. She wants to clear up Katie saying that Gretchen said Tamara roofied her. Alexis ends up texting Andy by accident the seating chart. Then she texts, "Oh my God, that was meant for another Andy." He said, "Well, what do you think?" She's responded back, "Y'all know what y'all are doing." Gina said, "But yet she acts as if she doesn't care about what's going on here." I said, "Well, good point." They brought up the kids segment and said everyone is a wonderful mom. Now, here's where I was like, people may not agree. I've talked about Emily bringing up Luke's diagnosis. I see a lot of people saying she shouldn't have brought it up because he doesn't have agency. A lot of people saying they thought it was good. I always said stuff like that. I don't mind when the women bring that stuff up like that, but because the kids don't have full agency and can say, "I don't want that brought up, don't talk about it," you have to be very careful. However, I thought it was good that she talked about it because there's women that are watching that could be like, "Oh my gosh, this is what's going on with my kids." However, it was the opposite. She had people sliding into her DMs saying that she needed to test Luke for pandas. She said she's not a medical doctor, but basically it's associated with strep throat. In January, Luke got a bad case of strep throat. And with pandas, the bacteria remains. It affects the brain and makes the brain swell. So all of the symptoms that he's having are associated with strep throat, and our kids that are on the spectrum that have strep throat are at a higher risk for that. In addition to the ARFID that he has. And I said, again, if Emily had not had brought that up, she would have never known to get tested for that. Because now, fast forward, he's going to have, I think she said 3 maybe, laser treatments to try to reduce the swelling on his brain. Because Andy was like, "Is this something?" And everybody was floored. So Andy was like, "Can it be like cured or like reversed?" And she said, "They hope so." He's going to have 3 sessions of laser therapy to try to shrink his brain. So again, I go back to this is why I was like, I was glad Emily brought it up. Again, the way you handle it just has to be very delicate. But look, this could be something that helps Luke. So I hope so. So good for Luke. Jen's son Dawson graduated from boot camp. He passed out 20 minutes into the ceremony, and they spent the rest of the time in medic. 3 days before boot camp, they took him out to the forest basically and said, run, Forrest, run. Worked their body, and his body gave out. Andy asked about Sydney. Tamra said Sydney came to the house to have lunch with Sophia. She went outside. They talked for 30 minutes. At the very end, Sydney asked her, can I hug you goodbye? Tamra starts crying, although I never see a tear with Tamra or even her eyes water, but it could be, who knows? And I can't help but wonder, in the words of Carrie Bradshaw, and I can't help but wonder, time and time again, we've seen Sydney ask Tamra, don't bring me up. Don't post pictures of my graduation that I let you go to. But because somebody tells Tamra that's why you weren't at the graduation, she posted pictures, it starts Sydney pissed off again. Sydney being upset with her. Is Sydney just past that now? Like, she gonna do what she gonna do. I miss her, so we gonna take steps forward, and I'm just gonna ignore it. Because why would you continue to talk? Like, why would you bring this up? Unless maybe she feels like Sydney's still gonna move forward with her. I don't know. So a viewer asked Emily how's her relationship with Shane. Emily said it's good. Basically, she's up and down. He's stable. And she may not get the emotional support, but she gets that from Heather. Shannon asked about Luke. Jen asked about Luke. Of course, Gina, she gets it from Gina. She said, but she realizes she needs Shane's stableness. And I feel that way about Corey. Corey is very solid, and it allows me to be up and down. So I get it. He brings up Emily's wife swap episode. She said, I realized just how much Shane does around the house because that other husband ain't do nothing. Did y'all watch it? What y'all think? Gretchen finally comes out looking like Tamara said, John Benet Ramsey. They talk about her wardrobe, her clothes that she wears on the show. They say they like it. Andy said, child, what you been up to since we saw you last? We know you got a beautiful daughter. For work, what you do? She said, I do a lot of digital marketing for companies. I'm considered an influencer. That's my main source of income. Use code Gretchen20. I was going to say, what does that? Never mind. So Andy said, well, what does Slade do professionally? Gretchen said he's a consultant and he also sits on the Liberace Foundation board. Andy said, the pianist? What's his connection? Gretchen said he happens to be friends with Jonathan Warren, who is the the concierge of Monaco, and he runs the foundation out of Vegas. So he has to be on that board. Now, if I'm not mistaken, y'all, the people that already went to the foundation. Sorry, y'all might hear me dumping something, but I just got notification about me running out of room, trying. I got to make sure this thing saves. Okay. So the people that already said, he does not have a paid. His board membership is not his board. Him sitting on the board. He's not paid. They bring up Tamara and Gretchen, a 17-year feud and counting. How could they not have moved on? Gretchen says she had reservations coming back, but she didn't spend time thinking, I'm going to have the upper hand with Tamara. I got her. She said coming for Tamara wasn't in my thought process. Tamara doesn't believe it. Somebody else wrote in and said, Tamara, how could you pretend bringing Joe Della Rosa to 2 events wasn't an intentional dig at Gretchen? Tamara said it wasn't. Gretchen's one of my friends. Gretchen says, I think it was interesting that you would bring her out of everybody, but what can I expect? Tamara said, I'm not here to please you. Gretchen said, I didn't say you were. I said, well, I agree with Gretchen on that. So another viewer says, Gretchen, how you blaming Tamara for Slade not having no job for nearly 2 decades? Gretchen said, if it came across that way, I'm sorry. I agree with Tamara. Tamara said, it didn't come across that way. You said it. Gretchen said, I was trying to say being on a public platform is such a level, it can cause harm to somebody's life. Tamara said, but him being arrested didn't affect him getting a job. I said, ooh. Gretchen said, no. When I tell you the way all the ladies look confused. Another viewer said, Gretchen, how does Slade contribute to the household? Gretchen said, what we didn't see was when she was at that slumber party with Emily and Heather, and even Terry had sat down. They were talking about who pays the bills, yada, yada, yada. She said, what I said was, if I go to the grocery store, Slade pays for groceries. If he goes to the grocery store, if she goes, she pays. If he goes, he pays. Heather said, listen, it wouldn't have even been brought up except for we were talking about marriage. And you told me on the show, which they show a flashback in 2012, she was not going to marry Slade because of the financial obligations. She said, you told me that on camera. That's why I brought it up. So then when you turned around and proposed marriage to him, it seemed fake. The proposal, because you had told me you were not going to marry him. And Tamara said, for the record, no one's questioning your relationship. It's not that we believe your relationship was fake. It was the proposal. That does make sense to me. You sat on camera and told Heather you were not marrying Slade because of, the financial thing, but then you turn around and propose. It makes sense. So there we have it. So Andy's like, so I always thought it was because you wanted Bravo to pay for it. And she said, no, look, I'm ready. We just didn't feel like it was that big of a commitment, by the way. So Jen said, well, you're married. Andy said, y'all married? She said, well, we had a spiritual ceremony. So in the eyes of God, they're married. They didn't get the legal paperwork, but in God's eye. I said, I'm sick of people. I'm sick of them. Anyway, Andy said, what's interesting is that Alexis was the first housewife on a show that was really open about her faith. And it seems you've gotten more religious than when you were here last. Or are you just sharing it more? She says, I think I'm just sharing it more. I grew up in a very Christian household, a strict Christian household. I went to Christian school my entire life. She went to Baylor University, which is a Christian Baptist school. So that's part of the reason her and Alexis connected as friends back then. I said, isn't it funny they talk about their religion, but not their relationship with God? Anyway, Andy asked if Slade's penis was still broken. Gretchen said he's doing things to fix it. I don't think you want me to get into how it got broken. Gina said it was a mechanical error. Somebody wrote in and said, Gretchen, you mentioned several times during Heather's sleepover, Fireball got you wild. Wild. Were you looking for liquid courage to bring up the rumor about Tamara? Gretchen said, I had no intention on bringing it up. Listen, Andy said this person who was referenced, who we did not name, is completely denying it, saying it's fabrication. Heather said it wasn't premeditated. Tamara says BS. Now, look, I'm a little bit with Tamara. Emily and Heather wanted to hear bad singing from Tamara in a booth. You bring up that, and I do think she drank that fireball on purpose to say it. I'm sorry, I do think it was premeditated. If it wasn't that, it was something. And like Tamara said, I thought we had moved forward from that beach day. I didn't bring you up when we were in Temecula at all. I had to agree with her. I definitely had to agree. So they go back and forth. Um, okay, so basically, Emily and Tamra said they were hopeful. Emily said too that after they made up at the beach, they were hopeful. Gretchen says, can I say something? I agree. I want to apologize to you for doing that. But in me saying it, it was a part of what was already out in the press. And that's the problem I have with you, because it feels like Tamara does that. Tamara will say it's out in the press so I can talk about it. I do it. I'm wrong. Whew, child. So somebody wrote in and said, Tamara, why are you overreacting about this rumor when it was so long ago? Don't you also bring up dirt on people? Tamara says, what have I brought up recently? Shannon said, you accused Jen of having an affair. Andy said, well, you brought it up tonight that Shannon recorded Vicky. Tamara said, yeah, because she went after Katie about it. So basically, I'm bringing up Shannon recording Vicky because Shannon just went after Katie for recording her. They bring up Shannon recording Vicky again. Shannon said, I wanted to make sure all parties were safe. Andy said, and yes, they were safe. Let's move on from this. Tamara said, but then you called me and said, who would want to be with Vicky? She treats her boyfriends not good. Shannon said, I didn't say that. Andy said, and here you go. You just proved my point. What reason would she have to say that? But Tamara said, but this was 2 years ago, trying to justify it like it's not in the past. Andy said, I understand, but the point of the question was you bringing up stuff all the time. Tamara says, oh, I have. Now all of a sudden you have. You wanted them to tell you what you brought up. Andy said, you just brought up two things. Heather said, case in point. I said, come on. Shannon goes on to say something to chime in. Tamara says, shut up. Shannon was like, oh, you need to stop speaking to me that way. What is wrong with you? Andy said, I'm trying to prove a point. Emily said, well, I think you did a good job. Gretchen said, we're not the only ones that bring up stuff from the past. She does too. So in the meantime, Tamara and Gina are talking, and Gina's trying to tell Tamara, chill out. You're doing exactly what she's saying you're doing. Just stop. Tamara's like, I'm trying to come from a place of kindness. So Jen said, when we were at your house for cake decorating, you threw out again that I've had all these affairs. And then when we went outside, you said, oh my gosh, I just was mad. I probably made it up. Girl, Shannon said, yeah, you told me it was because you were mad. Tamara said, it's not something I made up, but it was something that I heard, but I should have never said it. I regretted saying that. But the conversation we were having at the table was getting heated. So you throw out that she's having an affair because the conversation was getting heated. That's what people mean when they say Tamara is dangerous. That kind of stuff. Because it's not even like the blogs are saying this was reported. You're just saying stuff from out of nowhere. It's not even out there. You ain't giving no point of reference. None of that. None of that. So Shannon says, but it's pure hypocrisy. Tamara says, I'm not talking to you. Shannon says, who do you think you are? Emily said, but didn't you have pictures at the cake party of her, meaning Gretchen, having an affair? They show the flashback, Tamara holding up a picture of somebody that Gretchen was allegedly having an affair with. Tamara said, because I had had it at that point. Gretchen said, you had it at that point when you brought it up at the very beginning of the season, which she did. Her and Gretchen hadn't even really reacted. I mean, had an interaction. She said there was no reason for you to bring it up even back then. In the meantime, Shannon is like, she just waves everybody off. So Tamara waves her off. She said, I'm just waving you off. Gretchen said, I'm talking about 15 years ago when you brought it up. Tamara said, well, you made up lies about me back then. They show flashbacks of Tamara saying a guy came to her and said that Gretchen was cheating. I said, oh my God. Gretchen was like, okay, Tamara. Emily said it was the affair. Tamara said, me and Vicky and Gina Keogh walked in and saw you sitting on this guy's lap and they were kissing. She names the person, but they bleep it out. Gretchen says, you're such an effing liar. Tamara says, you're such an effing liar. Girl, they start yelling back and forth. Tamara talking about, you've been coming at me for 15 years. They calling each other both pieces of ish. Tamara screaming again, you've come at me for so effing long. You come after my husband. You come after my kid. I don't talk about you. And then it went off. We only need two parts. I'm sick of this. They're all hypocrites. Y'all let me know what y'all thought of the reunion part one. Love y'all. Talk to you later. Please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe.